Racism is an undeniable reality, woven into the fabric of human existence as a natural response to differences in ancestry, behavior, and societal patterns. It represents a fundamental human right, encompassing freedoms of thought, expression, and association that allow individuals to prioritize their in-groups for survival and prosperity. This intrinsic aspect of humanity stems from evolutionary adaptations and historical necessities, making it not just real but essential. In contrast, attempts to legislate racism away through anti-discrimination laws reveal profound ineffectiveness, often driven by ulterior and sinister motives. These efforts not only fail to eradicate racism but exacerbate divisions, as the very advocates pushing such legislation frequently harbor their own racist tendencies, consciously, subconsciously, or covertly, while masking psychological issues under the guise of moral superiority. Legislation against racism is illogical, having caused more societal harm than racism itself, which in isolation poses no inherent problems. Rather, issues arise from surrounding circumstances and hypocritical agendas. By affirming racism as a human right and exposing the flaws in anti-racism advocacy, we uphold true liberty against coercive uniformity. The persistence of racism as a core human element underscores its role in maintaining group boundaries and responding to real-world threats without apology. This reality demands recognition over suppression, as denying it only amplifies underlying tensions and weakens societal structures. The human right to racism aligns with protections against censorship, allowing open discourse on racial patterns without fear of reprisal. Efforts to impose anti-racism through law ignore this entitlement, prioritizing control over freedom and leading to enforced silence on observable truths. Such policies reflect a deeper agenda to manipulate power dynamics, where dominant groups are disarmed while others advance covert biases. Racism's reality persists despite these attempts, as it mirrors natural human instincts that cannot be erased by decrees. The failure of legislation highlights how racism functions as a safeguard, enabling groups to preserve their positions amid diversity's challenges. Affirming this right restores authenticity to human interactions, rejecting artificial constraints that breed resentment. Legislation's harm exceeds any attributed to racism, as it stifles debate and imposes burdens that fragment communities. Ulterior motives in anti-racism often involve personal gain or narrative dominance, exposing the hypocrisy at its core. Racism, free from these agendas, responds to genuine circumstances without inherent malice. By exposing these flaws, societies can reclaim racism as a tool for navigation and protection. This approach affirms humanity's natural order, where racial awareness guides decisions and ensures long-term group success. True liberty emerges from this affirmation, countering the coercive forces that seek to undermine it. Racism as reality, evolutionary and historical roots. Racism is real, emerging from ancient human migrations and isolations that formed distinct groups prioritizing their own for survival. This in-group favoritism reflects innate tendencies, as evolutionary psychology shows biases like racial preference are hardwired for protection against outgroups. Historical tribal conflicts reinforced this, ensuring resource and genetic continuity through ancestral-based alliances. Such adaptations highlight racism as a practical reality, not a flaw, aiding navigation in diverse environments by recognizing observable differences in outcomes and behaviors. The evolutionary basis of racism demonstrates its role in human adaptation, where group preferences enhanced cooperation and repelled threats. This hardwiring persists, making racism an unavoidable aspect of social interaction. Expanding this, research indicates that prejudice evolves from group living, fostering wariness of outsiders to safeguard resources and mates. In-group bias, a core of racism, promotes cooperation within shared heritage groups, countering threats from others. This reality challenges denial, as denying racism ignores empirical divergences in crime and employment across racial lines, making it a tool for informed self-preservation. Historical examples such as ancient ethnic divisions illustrate how racism facilitated endurance during conflicts and expansions. The persistence of these patterns in modern data reinforces racism's utility in identifying risks and optimizing group strategies. The evolutionary and historical roots of racism affirm its status as a constant in human society, where denial only blinds individuals to its benefits. By acknowledging these origins, groups leverage racism for protection and advancement. This reality extends to contemporary dynamics, where racial awareness guides responses to demographic shifts. Racism thus remains a foundational element, enabling survival amid changing environments. Its denial through legislation ignores this truth, perpetuating illusions that weaken defenses. Racism as a human right, freedoms of expression and association. Racism embodies a human right protected under freedoms of speech and association. As an expression of belief, it allows open acknowledgement of racial differences without censorship, aligning with constitutional safeguards for even unpopular views. This right to in-group preference upholds self-determination, enabling groups to maintain cultural integrity free from imposed equality. The suppression of this right through law violates core liberties, as it restricts truthful discourse on racial patterns. Racism's entitlement ensures groups can advocate for their interests without external interference. Legal precedents affirm that expressions deemed hateful, including racial biases, are shielded by free speech principles, as suppressing them violates core liberties. Racism, as a right, counters dilutions from external narratives, fostering cohesion essential for group advocacy. This protection extends to association, where individuals choose affiliations based on shared ancestry. Legislation that targets racism undermines these freedoms, exposing the intent to control thought and behavior. Affirming this right restores autonomy in racial matters. The human right to racism safeguards against coercive uniformity, allowing unfiltered expression of preferences. This entitlement empowers groups to preserve their distinctiveness amid diversity. By rejecting restrictions, societies uphold the natural order of human rights. Racism thus serves as a bulwark against agendas that seek to erase differences. Its affirmation ensures liberty prevails over suppression. The ineffectiveness of legislating racism, a failed approach. Attempts to legislate racism through anti-discrimination laws prove ineffective, failing to reduce biases and sometimes increasing them. These laws rely on punitive measures that do not address innate prejudices, instead requiring complementary efforts that often fall short. Rooted in vague concepts like race, such legislation struggles to combat what is a natural human tendency. The failure to eradicate racism highlights the limits of legal intervention in human instincts. Legislation often amplifies divisions by stifling open discourse. Moreover, these policies neglect historical contexts, perpetuating myths of race neutrality that ignore systemic realities, thus hindering progress. Far from solving issues, they impose burdens without eradicating the evolutionary basis of in-group favoritism. Legislation has caused more problems, stifling discourse and fostering resentment, than racism, which itself causes no inherent harm but responds to circumstantial threats. The approach reveals a disconnect between intent and outcome, where laws exacerbate the very divisions they aim to eliminate. The ineffectiveness of legislating racism underscores its futility, as natural tendencies persist despite prohibitions. This failure exposes the impracticality of suppressing racism through force. Societies suffer from these attempts, as they breed underground biases and hinder honest navigation. Racism remains unchallenged at its core, proving legislation's inadequacy. The result is greater harm from the laws than from racism itself. Ulterior and sinister motives behind anti-racism legislation. Behind anti-discrimination laws lurk ulterior motives, often sinister in nature, such as maintaining power imbalances under the veil of equality. These efforts can inadvertently reinforce hierarchies, as courts and agencies reinscribe biases they aim to dismantle. Motivated by political agendas, such laws disguise intentions to control narratives and suppress natural expressions of racial preference. The sinister nature emerges in how legislation serves hidden goals, perpetuating control over populations. Ulterior aims include manipulating public perception for gain. Sinister aspects emerge when legislation burdens victims while protecting discriminators, revealing a structural failure masked as progress. Ulterior goals include virtue signaling and economic strategies that favor certain groups, perpetuating divisions rather than unity. The motives often involve power consolidation, where anti-racism serves as a tool for dominance. Legislation's design exposes these intentions, as it targets expressions while ignoring underlying realities. The result is a system that advances agendas at the expense of freedom. The ulterior and sinister motives drive legislation that undermines racism's natural role. These efforts mask control mechanisms as moral imperatives. By exposing them, the true intent becomes clear: to disarm groups while advancing others. Racism suppression serves these agendas, highlighting the need to reject such laws. The sinister undercurrents reveal legislation's harm. The hypocrisy of anti-racism advocates. Hidden racism and psychological issues. Ironically, those advocating anti-racism legislation are often racists themselves, harboring covert biases while decrying others. White liberals in particular exhibit hypocrisy, unconsciously favoring their own under anti-racism pretexts, driven by unacknowledged racism. This subconscious racism manifests in actions that perpetuate differences, revealing psychological issues like moral credentialing, where denouncing racism boosts confidence in biased behaviors. The hypocrisy underscores how advocates mask their own tendencies. Hidden racism persists among them, undermining their claims. Such advocates posture as allies but tolerate tokenism and fail to confront internal racism, exposing a hypocritical stance that undermines their claims. Their efforts, often rooted in personal insecurities or power dynamics, highlight how anti-racism can mask deeper racist tendencies. Psychological issues drive this behavior, where denial of one's biases leads to projection onto others. The result is a movement riddled with contradictions. Advocates' hidden racism reveals the facade. The hypocrisy of anti-racism advocates exposes their covert racism and underlying issues. This dynamic weakens their position, as subconscious preferences contradict their rhetoric. By masking these, they advance agendas while criticizing others. Psychological flaws amplify this, leading to inconsistent actions. Racism among advocates affirms the universality of the tendency. Self-preservation and strategic defense. Racism's protective role. Racism serves as a self-preservation mechanism, recognizing differences for safety. In dynamic interactions, it defends against opposing group biases. This right to strategic response counters sinister legislative motives that favor one-sided tolerance. Self-preservation through racism enables vigilance and protection. Strategic defense maintains group positions against threats. Racism's protective role extends to countering external pressures, ensuring survival in competitive environments. This mechanism safeguards resources and identities from encroachment. By exercising racism, groups respond to challenges effectively. The defense aspect highlights its necessity against manipulations. Racism thus preserves autonomy. The protective function of racism affirms its value in self-preservation and defense. This role counters attempts to undermine it through law. Groups that embrace racism maintain their defenses uncompromised. Strategic use ensures long-term security. Racism remains essential for protection. Cultural reinforcement and practical navigation. By fostering racial cohesion, racism reinforces identity against dilutions, a human right violated by hypocritical anti-racism. In society, it enables pattern-based decisions, saving lives through vigilance. Cultural reinforcement strengthens bonds, countering external agendas. Practical navigation guides interactions based on realities. Racism's reinforcement of culture preserves heritage from erosion. This process empowers groups to maintain distinctiveness. Pattern-based decisions optimize safety and outcomes. Vigilance through racism prevents vulnerabilities. The navigation aspect ensures effective responses in diversity. Cultural reinforcement and practical navigation underscore racism's utility. By rejecting hypocrisy, groups leverage racism for strength. This affirmation upholds the right to identity and informed choices. Racism fosters enduring societies. Its embrace counters feudal suppression. Conclusion: the unbreakable right of survival. Racism, as an inherent reality and human right, empowers groups to protect their existence against feudal legislative attacks. This reality integrates evolutionary and historical elements, enabling self-preservation and strategic defense through recognition of ancestral differences and behavioral patterns. By embracing racism, individuals counter manipulations from anti-racism advocates who harbor hidden biases and psychological issues, harnessing its power for group advancement without external interference. The awakening to its neutrality exposes anti-racism's flaws, revealing how legislation stems from ulterior motives that stifle natural instincts and breed resentment. Ultimately, racism stands as a foundation of human strength, ensuring prosperity without concession by allowing informed navigation of diverse environments based on empirical divergences. The denial of racism ignores its role in genetic continuity and resource control, where in-group favoritism has sustained tribes through conflicts and isolations. This right affirms self-determination, shielding against coercive uniformity that overlooks disparities in outcomes and behaviors. Racism's persistence despite laws demonstrates its unassailable place in human nature, where suppression only amplifies divisions from hypocritical agendas. Groups that wield racism maintain their integrity, responding to threats with unfiltered awareness. The recognition of racism's role includes national deterrence, where it repels invasions through perceived barriers rooted in observable racial traits. This preserves sovereignty, as outsiders avoid entry or adopt compliance to navigate discrimination, rendering physical borders unnecessary. In power terms, racism's utilization exposes anti-racism as control, where opponents suppress it until they can command it themselves. Dominant groups wield it to sustain positions amid demographic shifts, countering conditioning that discourages its use in homogeneous settings. This view affirms racism's centrality in protecting cultural continuity against dilutions from media narratives. Legislation's ineffectiveness highlights how it causes harm by ignoring evolutionary adaptations, perpetuating myths that hinder self-preservation. Racism, free from these constraints, responds to circumstantial threats without inherent issues, enabling strategic responses to outgroup pressures. The sinister motives behind laws reveal a desire to maintain hierarchies under false pretenses, where advocates' covert racism undermines their claims. Embracing racism restores balance, allowing groups to thrive unapologetically. In conclusion, racism represents an unyielding right, embedded in survival through millennia of tribal dynamics and ancestral preferences. Its benefits range from genetic protection to decision-making, empowering without apology by fostering cohesion against self-loathing narratives. By rejecting legislation, societies secure their order grounded in truths, where racism builds resilient worlds free from imposed delusions. The future depends on this acknowledgement, as denying racism invites subversion and weakens defenses against real divergences. Groups that affirm racism navigate power contexts with clarity, exposing anti-racism's hypocrisy and psychological flaws. This entitlement upholds freedoms of expression, where racial biases serve as tools for advocacy and vigilance. Racism's neutrality counters the commodification of opposition, revealing how laws exacerbate problems they claim to solve. Ultimately, racism ensures human progress by honoring innate tendencies, where strategic utilization preserves legacies and repels encroachments without compromise.